there's been so much unfair criticism about the way that IHOP handled the early days. But I mean, they were completely blindsided. And there's a timeline where there's some stories that differ and from what was presented on October 9th versus what was presented on October 24th. But my assessment is that, like, from an organizational standpoint, the crisis started on October 24th, because that was when the full breadth of the allegations were presented to the ELT, and the next day there was a 50-page document presented as well. I don't think IHOP's really in crisis mode anymore. Mike is separated. They realize there's a lot of deficiencies in the organization that need to change. They're doing that. I mean, really the only crisis aspect to this is just the continued bombardment of accusations coming from the outside. IHOP had no choice but to proceed with its independent investigation. The McNamara report came out yesterday, and from the advocate group's perspective, it's incomplete. But they chose not to participate, and that's unfortunate because IHOP didn't have access to the information that they claim to have. Again, without seeing evidence, he's innocent until proven guilty. But absolutely, I agree with the McNamara report that he engaged in inappropriate sexual contact, clergy misconduct, but I don't think you could conclude that there was abuse until an investigator is given the opportunity to question those women claiming that they were abused.
Do you think that Volz is trying to create like a whole industry around clergy SA or?
Man, this is such a delicate topic, and again, I really enjoyed Volz as a person one-on-one. I think that it felt like, to me, part of the reason why the advocate group and Volz never agreed to IHOP's independent investigator was because they needed somebody from the sort of clergy sexual abuse advocacy community. It's a pretty small community. There's only a couple of sort of Christian investigative, organizations, and there's some individuals, but they all know each other. They all, they're either on each other's boards or have worked together. So there is this sort of worldview. We did a lot of research on those groups and what constitutes abuse, and I think that there's a certain number of practitioners that the advocate group would only accept because it would increase the likelihood that there would be abuse found in their investigation. So for example, there are people that would say anytime someone in ministry has any form of sexual contact with somebody that would be subordinate to them, that's automatically abuse. And I don't know that I disagree with that, but I also know that there can be instances where somebody who might be younger or subordinate could maybe also seduce a minister. That's why it's so important to actually be able to get the facts and question, the people involved. Yo te amo, sin temores, sin medidas, yo te amo.
Buenos dias, mis amigos. Welcome to my channel. Please support your local food bank, drug and alcohol center. So it's looking like this is going to be, well, we don't know, but apparently Eric, the crisis manager, is out. But he decided to go onto social media one last time and say an hour of his interpretation of the events leading up to where we're at today. And I thought this would be a good opportunity. This is Eric, the crisis manager, and he has deleted all his doxing posts. Now, I have some of them archived, so I'll put on the screen right now. But he's been doxing the advocate group, and, well, that's what he's been doing. But he's deleted everything. So we're going to look at Eric in this video. This is his website. This is his YouTube. If you haven't checked this out, we're going to look at some of his videos. Julie Roys has talked about, here it is here. This is a lady that has a Roys report and has been reporting about, for an example, Bob, he likes to pretend he's a prophet. Put on the screen that, well, he's being barred from IHOP, Mike Bickle, and following lots of different articles. Now, this is the video. She says, why would anyone care about what the PR guy thinks? In all my reporting, I've never seen anything quite like this. Usually the PR guy tries to remain invisible. Well, in fairness to Eric, he did stay invisible behind the scenes for months. He's known way before anybody knew. In fact, we'll play a little bit of the video. I downloaded it. It's an hour long. I'll play a few minutes of it, and I'll also leave a link in the description. By the way, thank you to my friends who just click the like button. Leave me a comment. So he stayed invisible for months before this actually came about. After all, they're just the conduits. But this guy seems to revel in making it all about himself. He's a study in what not to do. And in fact, Mr. Bowles, Mr. T, right? This is the lawyer that advocates for abuse survivors inside and outside the courtrooms throughout the United States. He said regarding, this is a post regarding Eric, because if you're just getting into this now, Eric was the crisis manager. He's been behind the scenes this whole time, and he's out. He's now declared the crisis is over, where the advocates and the purported victims that Mr. Bowles is representing won't participate with their high-priced lawyers, and so they're calling it crisis over. I think that many folks stopped believing you. This is Eric. A few weeks ago, probably because you've been selective about the truth. The truth is that I've never committed to you or anyone else. My conversations with the AG group are protected by attorney-client privilege. If I was representing them as an attorney, why would you and Eric, General Fuller, be repeatedly meeting with them without my knowledge and outside my presence? That would be highly unethical. I'm sure attorney could. I like this guy, Mr. Bowles, right? He's been a shining light in this sex scandal at Mike Bickle, IHOP. So what that he's saying is that he is advising them, but he's not representing them. All the way down to the bottom, and then we'll watch the video. In fact, you've actually managed to grow the crisis to something even more unfathomable and tragic. You know, I agree. You might be a great crisis manager when it comes to international abductions and persecutions. We're going to look at that. You are not a great crisis manager when it comes to related to sexual abuse in the church. And Eric has, well, right from day one, we might as well look at that right away. This is my first video that I put out when he became crisis manager. All right, so we'll listen to a bit of this, and then we'll get to that other video.
The investigators have already started. IHOPKC has turned over its documents. The investigators are in contact with the advocate group and all the known alleged victims. Everyone's going to say, how long is this going to take? Honestly, the length of time it takes depends on several factors, but the main one is going to be whether or not the alleged victims and the parties involved in representing them are willing to participate.
Did you hear what he just said? Nothing has changed. The crisis manager is saying they've hired private detectives to do a third-party independent investigation that they're paying for. They have no idea whether or not the advocates and the women will talk to them. Nothing's changed.
Naming dates, because all the armchair investigators are online are going to be picking all this apart.
There was a mockery, there's been doxing, and there's been half-truths. All right, he's been behind the scenes for months. All right, so I'll play you 5 minutes.
Something that has not been publicly disclosed before is that almost 5 months before these allegations were made public, I actually received a phone call from someone who's very close to the main alleged Jane Doe. And that person said, you know, I'm heartbroken. There's all this crazy stuff happening in this community. These things are going to be coming forward. I don't know who else to talk to. I don't really feel comfortable talking to anybody here at IHOP. And so for about 5 months, I was taking phone calls from this friend of mine, just listening.
What's your friendship like with Mike Bickle, or relationship, or if there is
Man,
one
that's
at
a
all?
crazy story too. Like, in the 7 years that I had been visiting IHOPKC, I got to be a part of like their last One Thing conference, worshiped with them for the Send. They did this, amazing conference. They filled Arrowhead Stadium, and then there was a bunch of worship on a piece of property that IHOPKC owns called the Truman property. I have a lot of mutual friends with Mike Bickle, but I never became friends with him. I never had a cell phone. I never had a private lunch with him. I never even had a private conversation alone with him. And it was, it was something that I noticed a couple times. Like, that's interesting. Like, I wonder why I've never formed a friendship with this man, until the day I was sitting across the table from him, and I'm asking him questions. And that was actually one of my requirements, that if I was going to take this case on behalf of IHOPKC, that I would have the opportunity to sit down with Mike, look him in the face, look in his eyes, and discern what the truth was. And so I met with him on multiple consecutive days as soon as I arrived, and we went line by line through what was being alleged.
So after that meeting, what was your communication like with him?
So I arrived on October the 29th, and the first time I met with him was actually the next day. I went with the executive director, and I was surprised at his lack of understanding of how serious this was. He wasn't aware of even the nature of the allegations. And I made it very clear to him that I was there on behalf of IHOPKC. And you could tell, he was hurt that his friends of decades were presenting these allegations. But I think what I perceived is he thought more, I was like, oh, these guys are, they're kind of attacking me in the media or publicly, but this'll, and I was like, no, this is a lot more serious than that. And one of the main things that a lot of people don't know or haven't connected was these weren't just allegations of abuse, there was allegations of crimes. And there was an insinuation of a date rape. And that has now been made public in an article that the main alleged Jane Doe, she gave an exclusive interview and kind of told her whole story. At the time, though, that wasn't known, that wasn't public. But date rape is rape in the first degree, and there's no statute of limitations on date rape. We also knew that someone very close to the main alleged Jane Doe had consulted an attorney and asked, how do you prove a date rape happened 25 years ago? And, so that was one of the things that kind of thrust this from IHOP's perspective into kind of, we have to be careful. Mike needs to obviously be careful, but because the allegations were being presented to the organization, they had a legal obligation to make sure that the executive leadership knew about it, and that's when they started to consult attorneys too.
Yeah, so these attorneys get brought in, and initially it seemed like, from my perspective, IHOPKC had Stinson LLP.
Well, even before that, so there's been so much unfair criticism about the way that IHOP handled the early days, but they were completely blindsided. And there's a timeline where there's some stories that differ, and from what was presented on October 9th versus what was presented on October 24th. But my assessment is that, from an organizational standpoint, the crisis started on October 24th, because that was when the full breadth of the allegations were presented to the ELT, and the next day there was a 50-page document presented as well.
Eric, the crisis manager, has done a horrible job, in my opinion, in not representing the truth, but giving sort of the truth and misdirection during this whole crisis, from the doxing to the mockery, even to this saying the crisis is over. If you're part of Mike Bickle's, all right, if you're involved with this crisis, there have been millions of people that were affected, potentially, with his sermon of the black horse of accusation, and this is spiritual manipulation, all right? So we might as well look at that first. Before we do that, this is my website, and the advocates are advocating for the purported victims, all right? And, you know, the whole thing is an absolute disaster. But I believe, here's a great thing. I'll say this, all right? Doesn't matter here's a great thing. Put all your confidence in the Lord. Every bit of your confidence. God is in control of his bride. He can see everything. He can see behind the doors with Mike Bickle and Eric, the crisis manager. He knows all the conversations. God knows everything. All right? And God also knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So if you're going through this crisis, if you're hurting right now because of the actions of Eric Volz, Mike Bickle, the ELT, all right? If you're part of the, don't understand, like, was Mike Bickle innocent this whole time and there was a black horse of accusation came down and he was taken into the throne of heaven in a chariot, all right? Put all your confidence in the Lord because God knows what's going to happen tomorrow and he's preparing us. So when we go through difficult times, all right, you know, it's a refining fire where God has his hand on his bride. He loves you, all right? So put all your confidence in the Lord, and even if this does get a total cover-up, sadly, what it's looking like, the women won't have their voices heard. They've closed it up. Crisis over. There is some talk of a tribunal-type situation. We'll see what happens with that. But if this is the end, put all your hope in the Lord. God knows, all right? Ultimately, I'll let you down. Eric will let you down. IHOP will let you down. Man will let you down. But God will never let you down. And that's why it's so important to put all your trust in the Father. All right? God will never let you down. He's always with you. All right. In this video with Eric, the crisis manager, in that video, he talked about the report. Now, I want to make this point. And then I got to hit this straight, all right? So this is my website. I've been documenting. This is the report. Click that little link. So this is modified January 31st, created January 31st. Jane Doe's. Now, in this report, if you were to ask Eric, the crisis manager, privately, not on social media, not spinning his narratives, I don't believe for a second he can read this report and recognize it as some sort of thorough report. It's a 7-page report that came out within a month, all right, of the investigation. The advocates and the purported victims weren't even involved. For him to come onto social media and say crisis over, I don't think for a second, if Eric was truthful, that he would recognize this as a real report or an investigation report. I just don't believe he would. I think he's invested. Well, I know he's invested economically. He was hired by IHOP. He's been involved with IHOP for 7 years. And I don't know the extent of his relationship with Mike Bickle. All I know is what he's saying on social media in his private meetings with Mike Bickle. This is his website. And the reason I said that is because Eric Volz is incredibly intelligente. Here's one of his videos.
Y nosotros habíamos recibido varias amenazas. Era un peligro confirmado.
Un peligro confirmado. Yo tengo un acento de México. I speak Spanish because I graduated my Bible college in Mexico. Me gradué en mi escuela por la ciudad de México. Mi niño mayor estaba nacido por the DF de Mexico. My first daughter was born in Mexico City. I lived in Mexico City. Eric speaks Spanish. I speak Spanish. He has tiene un acento, no es de Mexico. He has an accent. The reason I showed you that is Eric is not stupid. This is a highly intelligent man. And when I say that is that he is an international traveler and he's a professional. All right. David House, internationally, like look at the different cases. In fact, this is in the airport. This is a mom. This is a mom. She's getting her son back, eh?
You look good.
Oh, thanks.
You too. Oh.
Praise the Lord. So, point of the, there's Eric, all right? There's Eric. That's Eric Volz. So, the point of showing you that is that Eric Volz is an extremely intelligent man, a very successful man, and that's why, you know, he received a lot of criticism from people like the reporter Julie Roy's, the Roy's Report. Volz has been on television many times, handled many different cases, and Eric received some incredible. And that's where I'm even myself conflicted. Why was he doxing the advocates? Why was he inflaming and throwing gas on this crisis? Why did he give so many half-truths and misdirection? You know, I believe that there's a spiritual component to all of this. I truly believe that. And I think that, like this guy here, if you're unaware, I did a little bit of research into Tyler, Bill Johnson, and many people inside of Bethel is on his social media. So the apostolic overseers of the ecclesia, God's government here on earth, C. Peter Wagner came up with the term New Apostolic Reformation. The apostle prophet as the leaders of the ecclesia, God's government here on earth. And I wonder about Eric being involved with IHOP for so many years. Is it possible that his spiritual paradigm that he's accepted Mike Bickle as his prophet? It would explain a lot to me why he's doing and what he did and how he handled this crisis, because I don't understand why he would ever accept this 7-page document as some sort of, like, if you were to take yourself out of the environment where you just came and you just read this document, if you're a lawyer, an investigator, or anyone that deals with crises, they'd read this document and say, what is this about? This has, this is like the only piece of evidence that they put out. This is directly from, this is the only thing they put out. I'm done with this video, and I hope the best for Eric Volz moving forward. I believe that, I'm glad that he's taken down his doxing. And like I said, I'll have to look at it. I was unaware until this morning that he had deleted all of it. And that's Mr. Joel Richardson. And I hope the best for Eric, you know. If it's true that this is his last video, I don't know. I don't know. Is he, I don't know. I have a hard time believing anything that's coming out of IHOP right now. And just because of how mismanaged this whole crisis has been. I'm done this video. And, you know, it's interesting. I was listening to some of his videos, and you know, I hope the best for Eric. And it really is. If you say whatever you want, Eric Volz has helped a tremendous amount of people in some horrible situations, and I recognize Eric as a brother. And he has an accent, a Nicaraguan accent, and you know, we're all saved by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. And if Eric watches this, if you watch this video, Eric, I've been praying for you. And, you know, I hope the best for you. And, you know, Eric, you could have done a lot better. And that's it. So I have got to hit the street. It's 6 a.m. And I usually go for a jog, and then I go do my outreach. And so I'm late today. So may the Lord bless you, keep you strong in the faith, and remember, Brother John loves you.
Yo te amo sin temor.